In order for Donald Trump to reach his goal of making America great again, he has to make certain groups in America poor again. A crucial part of Donald Trump making America great again for his voters and supporters is to make blacks, other minorities, and women poor again, to strip them of their income, their net worth, and their financial futures, and the legacies they could pass on to their future generations. I put an image, or actually two images, at the beginning of this video. One was showing the median net worth comparison between a median white family in the United States versus a median black and Hispanic family. The median white family has a net worth of around $284,000. The median black family has a net worth in the $40,000 range. The median Hispanic family has a net worth in the $60,000 range. Massive inequality in net worth. But let me go over something that you may have missed. And it's on the White House website. So I've got a screenshot of the title at the beginning of this video. And it's a fact sheet. It says President Donald J. Trump addresses DEI discrimination by federal contractors. From the White House website, dated March 26, 2026. You may have missed that announcement. So did I. Because there was a little distraction going on called the war Donald Trump started with Iran. But let me just go over some of the points. As a matter of fact, I'm going to read the whole thing. That's going to be the video. And it starts by addressing DEI discrimination by federal contractors. Today, President Donald J. Trump signed an executive order eliminated racially discriminated diversity, equity, and inclusion, parentheses, DEI practices by federal contractors and their subcontractors, ensuring merit-based and efficient contracting and employment. The order requires that all federal contracts that are subject to the Federal Property and Administrative Services Act include a clause prohibiting contractors and their subcontractors from engaging in racially discriminatory DEI activities. The order directs the Office of Management and Budget to issue guidance to contracting agencies to ensure compliance and identify economic sectors that pose a particular risk of engaging in racially discriminatory DEI activities. The order authorizes contracting agencies to cancel, terminate, or suspend contracts and to suspend or debar contractors for failure to apply. The order directs the Attorney General to prioritize potential claims under the False Claims Act against contractors or subcontractors that are in violation of the contractual terms prohibiting racially discriminatory DEI practice, and ensure the prompt review of related civil activities brought by private persons. The order directs the Federal Acquisition Regulatory Council to amend federal acquisition regulations to include this clause and remove any conflicting provisions. Promoting merit and efficiency in federal contracting. President Trump has been clear the federal government will promote equal treatment under the law of every American regardless of race or ethnicity and will hold its contractors to the same standard. DEI activities impose real costs on the American people, artificially restricting the labor pool, driving up hiring and operational costs, and creating workforce inefficiencies that are ultimately passed on to federal agencies and American taxpayers. DEI programs increase workforce turnover by elevating immutable characteristics over job performance and jeopardize employee collaboration and problem solving essential to fostering efficient and high quality work. Some entities, including government contractors, have attempted to conceal ongoing DEI activities even as the administration has worked to end them. This order establishes strong accountability mechanisms to ensure compliance is genuine and verifiable. Preventing these practices ensures taxpayer dollars are spent efficiently. Serving America, not ideological agendas. President Trump is continuing to deliver on his promise to end DEI across the federal government. In his first week in office, President Trump signed executive action that restored merit-based hiring and promotions across the federal government, ended radical and wasteful DEI programs and preferencing, and terminated the Federal Aviation Administration hiring policies that prioritize DEI over safety and efficiency. In January 2025, President Trump signed an executive order to ban the use of discriminatory race or sex-based preferences by any element of the armed forces, the Department of War, or the Department of Homeland Security, and abolish any remnant of DEI within these departments. In March 2025, President Trump signed a memorandum removing radical DEI from the Foreign Service. In April 2025, President Trump signed an executive order eliminating the use of disparate impact liability in various contexts to ensure equal treatment under the law. In April 2025, President Trump signed an executive order to restore safety and order in American classroom by ensuring school discipline policies are based on objective behavior, not DEI. In July 2025, President Trump signed an executive order to assure that AI models procured by the federal government prioritize truthfulness and ideological neutrality, not DEI. In December 2025, President Trump signed an executive order to end the outside influence of proxy advisors that prioritize racial, political agendas like DEI and ESG over investor returns. President Trump, we will terminate every diversity, equity, and inclusion program across the entire federal government. Let me decode for you. This is a manifesto to defund blacks, other minorities, and women and reduce their economic stature within the United States. That's what it is. Now, let me go another level. Recently, there was a federal lawsuit filed against the Trump administration for its, I guess, termination of people in independent federal agency. A former board member of the Federal Transportation Safety Board filed a suit saying that when people were terminated by Doge or whatever happened, that 75% of those people were black. That lawsuit is ongoing, going forward. What is happening here is a very clear, non-ambiguous purging of participation of blacks, other minorities, and women in the federal contracting space. I'm familiar with this. When I was in the business world, I often had to bid for contracts. For example, for a city, department, federal contractor, what have you. And there were sometimes affirmative action, which is wrapped up in this, requirements or identification. A lot of those companies that met that criteria were women owned. Now, some that met that criteria were technically women owned. They were owned by the spouse that ran the company, but the wife was put on there as the president or CEO to qualify under the affirmative action criteria to give them a better chance of winning the contract. So this targeting is to basically remove the ability of these firms, which may be a company, for example, that is doing janitorial services. It could be a company that is doing landscaping services. It could be a company that is supplying one component of a multi-billion-dollar aircraft program for the federal government. It could be a food service provider. The goal is to remove these minority or women-owned companies from the mix, so they're not participating economically in the spending of taxpayer dollars that we all contribute to. The anti-DEI is appealing to people that have a certain point of view that they're being unfairly dealt with, i.e. reverse discrimination, i.e. let's get back to merit base. You know what that was in the past, the merit base? The good old boy network. That's why we ended up with DEI and affirmative action laws, because everybody else was blocked out. And we're going back there again. So wake up, particularly women. 53% of white women voted for Donald Trump. You're dismantling your own financial future. Let me say it again. You're dismantling your own financial future. Latinos that voted for Trump, you're dismantling your own financial futures for you and your offspring and their offspring. Blacks that voted for Trump, you're dismantling your financial futures. Now, let me broaden this out. This is really not strictly defunding minorities and women. because he's defunding everybody below a certain economic status with the tariffs, with the high fuel prices, with the increase in healthcare costs, with not renewing the ACA subsidies. This is becoming the great America that Trump and Project 2025 architects want, based on financial status. You may say, well, we had 4 years of Joe Biden. During that 4 years of Joe Biden, we were still under Donald Trump's and the Republican tax plan from his first term in office. That tax plan that was a wealth transfer to the rich was renewed in the big, beautiful bill in 2025, because that's when that tax plan legally expired. And then they did the big, beautiful bill that kept those tax rates transferred to the rich, and then took a lot of other things from everybody else, such as $800 to $900 billion in Medicare that's going to be gone. And then, as I mentioned before, the ACA tax subsidies, reducing SNAP benefits, and attacking programs that allowed or made it easier for minorities to get into college. And now the cherry on top that just happened, the decimation of the Voting Rights Act, so that minorities can be written out of representation. And I'm not just talking about black folks, Latinos, same thing. They can draw those maps to write you out of representation. So, yes, this is long. Everything's not 30 seconds, but your financial future is worth that. And I want the middle class, the working class, whites to realize the only difference is you're being targeted generally with the rest of us, through the tariffs, through the gas prices, through all the additional expenses, through the transfer of wealth. It's just that black people, other minorities, and women are getting special treatment to defund them. And that's part of making America great again. And you folks are part of it, to keep you poor, but to keep us and put us back in the destitute status. Because all of the federal contracts and everything else to those classes of people, black folks, other minorities, and women, we're not going to see them anymore. And some firms that have become quite prosperous with these programs, they may just disappear altogether.